Children are considered some of the most vulnerable people in our society. That's why they're usually under the care of an adult guardian of some sort. There are times when children are found out on their own, lost, or having suffered some great tragedy. When that happens, we as a society make every attempt to care for those children by either finding their parents or placing them with other adults who are willing to take care of them. Usually, lost children are from the local area and their origin can be traced fairly easily. Sometimes, though, the children found are out of this world. Woolpit is a village in Suffolk County in England. It sits northeast of London between Bury St Edmunds to the west and Stowmarket to the east. The village's name first appeared on record in the late 10th century, but this story would happen a few hundred years later. It took place in the 12th century during the reign of King Stephen, sometime between 1135 and 1154. That period in England's history is called the Anarchy, a 19-year-long civil war caused by the death of King Henry I and the crowning of King Stephen. Empress Matilda was the daughter of Henry I and fully expected to become the queen upon his death, but the king's nephew and her cousin Stephen ended up seizing the crown. The country split down the middle and battled for quite some time over who should be in control. Matilda never did end up becoming queen, but her son did inherit the throne after the death of Stephen, making him King Henry II. That tumultuous time in English history didn't have much effect on the two children who showed up in Woolpit during harvest season sometime during that era. They were discovered hiding near one of the wolf pits, which was a deep pit created for trapping wolves, and how the village got its name. The children didn't speak English, and the villagers had never heard the language before. They were dressed in clothing of unusual color and made from materials that the villagers were unfamiliar with. The most surprising thing about the children, however, was the fact that their skin was green. Though confused, the locals wanted to help the children and they sent them to live with Richard de Calne, a local squire who lived nearby in Wilkes Hall. Some accounts label him Sir Richard, which would normally be the title of a knight, and others label him Lord Richard, which would make him a baron. Some historical records refer to him as something between a knight and a baron. It's believed that Richard was a doctor like his father, and that's why the children were brought to him after they were found. Initially, the children refused all the conventional food offered to them, crying at the sight of the food. Even though they hadn't eaten in days, they refused to eat anything. They persisted in that refusal for several days until they encountered some fava beans and began eating them eagerly. Some stories say the children found the beans in the garden and started eating them straight from the ground, but others say the villagers offered the beans to the children after picking them. That initial refusal and subsequent acceptance of the beans suggested a significant dietary adaptation phase for the children. As they gradually began to assimilate into the local diet, their green skin color faded. That transformation was particularly noted after they started consuming a more varied diet, including bread and other local foods. The boy, however, didn't adjust well. He remained generally lethargic and eventually died, possibly due to the drastic change in environment and diet. His cause of death would always remain a mystery, though. The girl, however, adapted more successfully. Over time, she completely lost the green tint to her skin and was noted to have developed a healthy complexion, indicative of her improved health and adaptation to the new diet. The girl, who was eventually named Agnes, gradually learned English and was able to provide more insight into her mysterious past. She told the villagers that the boy who had died was her brother and that they had come from the land of St. Martin. She described the land as having perpetual twilight, never having the sun fully rise or fully set, just always dimly lighting the area. She said that her people lived underground. That might suggest a lack of exposure to sunlight, potentially providing an additional explanation to their initial green skin color as a symptom, along with malnourishment of a condition like green sickness. Except she told them that almost everything, including the people, was green in the land of St. Martin. The only things that weren't green were things that weren't safe to eat. That would explain why the children refused to eat anything until they saw the fava beans, which were green. That would ultimately add more confusion as to their origin, as there was nowhere in this world where only green items were safe to eat. She went on to explain that the region she was from held St. Martin in high veneration. The land, according to her, was starkly different from England, not only in environmental aspects but also in its cultural practices, though it too was a Christian land which had churches just like the ones near Woolpit. Her understanding of religion was apparent in her acceptance of the baptism she received shortly after being discovered. It's unclear whether or not her brother was also baptized, and some stories say he died before and some say he died after the baptism. Agnes would recount a mysterious event that led to their arrival in Woolpit. She said that one day, when she and her brother were tending to her father's flocks, they discovered a cavern. When they went inside, they heard a mesmerizing sound similar to the chime of bells. She would later associate that sound with the bells of St. Edmund's Church about 7 miles or 11 kilometers away from the village. They followed the enchanting sound, which seemed to transport them instantaneously from their homeland to the fields of Woolpit. They immediately saw the bright sun overhead, and frightened, they hid near the wolf pit. That's where the villagers found them during the harvest. The mysterious green hue of the children of Woolpit has prompted various theories centered around conditions like hypochromic anemia, also known as chlorosis or green sickness. That condition, resulting from a dietary deficiency, notably affects the coloration of red blood cells and can impart a greenish tint to the skin. The condition also causes lethargy, which would have fit the boys' symptoms after they were found. Further analysis posits that if hyperchromic anemia were the cause, it would not be unique to just the children, but would have been more widespread, affecting a significant portion of the population at the time. That supports the claim that Agnes made that the people of the land of St. Martin were all green. Other theories were that the children might have been poisoned and left for dead. Arsenic poisoning could explain the skin coloring and why the boy died. He was the younger of the two and might have gotten a bigger dose compared to his sister. None of that is backed up with any evidence, though. Iron deficiency anemia, another common nutritional disorder, has also been discussed as a potential factor. That condition leads to symptoms such as pallor and fatigue, which could contribute to the overall health profile of the green children. The treatment and prevention strategies, including dietary adjustments and iron supplementation, mirror the dietary improvements noted in the children's recovery from their initial green skin condition. When people started considering where the children may have come from, many have said that they might have been Flemish immigrants who had settled in Fornham St. Martin, north of Woolpit. The two villages were separated by a river, which could have been the river in Agnes's account of her land. There were many immigrants from Flanders and Belgium who traveled to England, but in the 12th century many of them were persecuted and killed. During the Battle of Fordham, a large number of Flemish immigrants were killed, and that was close enough that the children may have wandered to Woolpit. During the time that the Flemish were being persecuted, they would often hide out in basements, which would give the child the idea that they always lived in twilight. That would also explain their unusual dress and language, being similar to Dutch. After being displaced by the war, they could have spent time in the woods becoming malnourished and found one of many mine passages in the area coming out near Woolpit. Of course, as many people have pointed out, if the children were displaced Flemish, that meant they weren't found during the reign of King Stephen, but later after King Henry II had taken the throne. One of the two original men who wrote about the story back then insisted that King Stephen was still reigning at the time. Also, historians have suggested that Richard de Calne, being an educated man, would have surely recognized the language spoken by the children. Of course, those are only the realistic theories. Many more imaginative and otherworldly theories have been presented over the years of where the green children came from. Robert Burton, in his 1621 work The Anatomy of Melancholy, suggested a celestial origin, proposing that the children fell from heaven. To put it in more simple terms, the green children were aliens. Agnes had mentioned a luminous country visible from their land, separated by a considerable river, suggesting a mystical or otherworldly realm close to the land of St. Martin. Burton believed that she was describing a planet that was Earth-like, but was trapped in rotation so the sunlight was always the same everywhere throughout the planet. He posited that there were some areas with permanently bright sun, some with permanently no sun, and areas in between. Agnes may have come from an area that was always in twilight, but her village could see across the river to a place with more sunlight. He went on to theorize that the children had come from Mars or Venus. It's not surprising that that would be one of the more common suggestions as the origins of the green children. The 1638 novel The Man in the Moon by Church of England Bishop Francis Goodwin was one of the first fictional books that included space travel. It described a voyage of utopian discovery. It's thought to be one of his earliest works and was published 5 years after his death. The book tells the story of a man who builds a flying device that ultimately takes him to the moon, where he meets people called Lunars. The Lunars told him that they keep peace on the moon by sending unruly children down to Earth, usually to North America, but sometimes their aim was off and the children end up in Europe, Asia, or Africa. He wrote that the Lunars spoke a strange language and were green, suggesting that was where the green children of Woolpit had come from centuries earlier. The notation of an extraterrestrial origin for the green children has been echoed throughout the centuries, with some modern theorists like Duncan Lunan in his 1996 article in Analog and later in his 2012 book Children from the Sky hypothesizing that the children might have been accidentally transported to Woolpit from an extraterrestrial home planet caught in synchronous orbit around its sun. Lunan described that planet as having a narrow twilight zone capable of sustaining life between its extremely hot light and frozen dark sides. His writing is heavily influenced by Robert Burton's theories. Parallel to these extraterrestrial theories are ideas rooted in ancient philosophy and modern mysterious events. Anaxagoras, a Greek philosopher, spoke of intelligent beings in a parallel world that mirrors our own, complete with natural landscapes and communities. Similarly, a modern official report on the mysterious disappearance of 5 U.S. naval Avenger bombers in 1945 hinted at a parallel world without a sun, accessed perhaps through malfunctioning compasses, leading to speculations about other dimensions existing alongside ours. The concept of portals between worlds also finds a place in these discussions. It's been suggested that accidental transitions, like that of the green children, or intentional travels between parallel worlds are possible, despite skepticism from the academic community, which often seeks more conventional explanations. In addition to extraterrestrial and parallel world theories, the folklore of the fairy realm or the otherworld provides a mystical dimension to the explanations. Described as an ethereal land of breathtaking beauty inhabited by magical creatures like fairies, this realm is believed to exist alongside our own. Irish folklore, with its tales of fairy trees and fairy forts, suggests that these mystical places serve as a gateway to the fairy world, and interfering with them can provoke the wrath of the fairies. There is a story of a monk who described going to fairyland when he was only a boy. He said that the land had no sun, but only because the sky was always cloudy. He said that the fairies had yellow hair and were the size of pygmies. They also rode horses the size of rabbits. He said their language was a variation of Greek. Most people recognize that his account shares almost no similarities to the description Agnes gave about where she was from, but others believe the monk's story is a lie and that the green children did come from fairyland. There's also the possibility that the children never existed at all, that their story is just legend and folklore, but there is a reasonable amount of reason to believe that they really did exist. The tale of the green children was first documented by historians like Ralph of Coggeshall and William of Newburgh around the late 12th century. Their accounts, considered relatively authentic for their time, lack the typical Christian moral undertones and instead present a narrative that's both enigmatic and grounded, with specific names and locations. That has allowed the story to maintain a unique position in the annals of medieval folklore, resonating with audiences for its blend of the everyday and the supernatural. William of Newburgh was resistant to write about the Green Children because he didn't believe the story was true. He changed his mind and published a book that included the story in 1189 after having heard the story from so many highly respectable people. Ralph of Coggeshall was the abbot of a small monastery in North Essex. In the late 12th century, he traveled to the area around Woolpit and heard the story directly from Richard de Calne himself. The story was included in his book that was published in 1220. Though there are minor differences in those two books, they are still quite similar from having come from separate sources. In Ralph's book, the children were only tinged with green, where William's book said they were completely green. In Ralph's account, the children had followed the cattle into the cave and suddenly ended up in Woolpit. William's recounting said that the children didn't know how they arrived near Woolpit. They heard a loud noise and they were suddenly in a different place with a bright sun. These accounts are also where the varying timeline comes in, as Ralph puts the children's arrival during the reign of King Stephen, and William claimed they arrive after King Henry II had taken the throne. Either way, the stories being so similar and coming from people directly involved in the children's lives have many people believe the children existed, though probably not aliens, fairies, or from an alternate universe. In the years that followed the children's sudden appearance, Agnes would continue to live with Richard de Calne and work for him on his property. Richard would say that Agnes was quite lascivious and insolent, but nobody knows if that was just her normal disposition or if it had anything to do with her mysterious origins. Her entire life she was asked about her origins, and she swore an oath that all the inhabitants and the plants of her country were green. She was said to have eventually married a man from King's Lynn, about 40 miles or 65 kilometers north of Woolpit. Her husband was believed to be a royal official named Richard Barr. A few records of Richard Barr and Agnes his wife are the last times the girl was seen in historical context. In contemporary times, the story of the Green Children continues to captivate and inspire. It serves as a focal point for discussions about otherness and xenophobia, reflecting societal attitudes towards the unfamiliar and the outsider. The narrative's persistence in modern literature and its occasional resurgence in academic discussions underscore its relevance as a tool for exploring and understanding historical human experiences and cultural boundaries. Over the centuries, the story has inspired a myriad of cultural works, from Herbert Reed's novel The Green Children to the community opera composed by Nicolas Le Fanu. The narrative has been adapted across various forms including literature, poetry, and music. Each adaptation explores different facets of the tale, from its mysterious allure to its deeper existential themes, showcasing the story's versatility and enduring appeal in cultural expressions. By examining how the tale of the Green Children has been woven through the fabric of historical and cultural narratives, it becomes clear that its impact extends far beyond its origins in a small Suffolk village. It challenges us to consider how history, folklore, and culture intersect, and how stories, whether based in fact or fantasy, become integral to our understanding of the past and our interpretation of the present. This tale, rooted in the heart of medieval England, transcends its temporal and geographical confines to raise universal questions about identity and the human inclination towards the mystical. It serves as a reminder of our perpetual quest to understand the unknown, a quest that prompts us to look beyond the surface of historical accounts and folklore, seeking reflections of our deepest fears, curiosities, and hopes. The story of the Green Children of Woolpit remains not just a curiosity from the past, but a mirror reflecting our ongoing dialogue with the mysteries that continue to inhabit our world. Many people are out there searching for their place in the world, whether they're from within your community or from an unknown, mythical land where everybody and everything is green. The human thing to do is make them feel as welcome as possible. Thanks for letting us tell you this sinister story. If you enjoyed it, subscribe on whatever platform you're on, and hit like, rate it, or leave a comment. Join us next week when we'll take you somewhere sinister.